Hello, everyone. I've got a question today about clipping. And basically, this person, his complaint was that his basses and his kicks sound boomy. He doesn't know why there's clipping. He doesn't know why the song might sound one way in Ableton, and then when it's output, it sounds another way. So video is really here for that purpose. I'm going to firstly attempt to show you how I deal with clipping. Some of the stuff might be really obvious to some of you, and maybe it's not, so it might be just worth watching anyway. And just, yeah, there's some other things I look out for when it comes to compression and limiting that I would say just try to avoid. So keep up with me now, and let's go. So basically, I've got this little kick, snare, and hat and bass loop. So that's it. So basically, the first thing I would do is I would look for any clips around here. So what I mean by a clip is if it's hot, right, it'll be an orange and a red signal around around each track. So if you look at the kick track, it's just going up to 0, and you look at the hats going to 0, so everything looks fine. So as far as I'm concerned, this is not clipping. It's really loud, but it's not clipping. So if you're getting clipping, the first thing to do is look at your samples, okay? Or look at if you're not using samples, you're using VST, just look at the levels of volume on your VSTs. But for this particular tutorial, I'll just be showing you the samples. So the first thing I'll do is I'll just double click on the clip, and I'll just look at one of the samples. I'll just do some analysis of the sample. And the way you know a sample's clipped is if it's going above this line here. So you can see here, there is actually a little bit of space between the top of the sound and the top of the sample limit. Okay, so this one's not clipping, although it's actually sometimes difficult to know if a signal has clipping in it because it may have been squashed before you get it. But in this case here, I don't think it's a clipping sample because I've got this from Splice, and most of their samples are pretty good. So that's the first things to look out for, this type of headroom. This one's fine. Just a bit of warning, a word of warning is if it's a little bit too close to the edge, that could cause future problems. What I mean by that is any effect that you put after you complete recording the song or the track could increase the volume of the track and therefore take it into a clipping zone. But this one's not clipping. Just to be safe, and I do this quite a lot, is I will go to the clip gain button of the sample, just tone it down a little bit. Maybe not too much, but just tone it down a little bit, just so we're safe. Okay, it doesn't affect the overall sound too much, but you're safer in that sort of respect. And you can look at the other samples. I mean, this hi-hat is potentially in some places peaking too much. So you can just reduce it a little bit here. And I mean, the snares are quite high. And I'll just show you a little trick. So if you select one of the samples and then you press Shift and select them all, you can actually just reduce the gain or even transpose them all at the same time. So I'm just going to reduce the gain a little bit. The best thing to do is to consolidate them. You can just select all of them and press Control J. They'll consolidate them so you can see them all together. And when you see them all together, you can see that this isn't going to clip. Okay, and similarly with the bass sound, there's some peaks here that could take us close to clipping, so let's just reduce this slightly, okay? Just to be safe, okay? So that's the first thing I'd do, look at the samples. The second thing you would do is once you start using effects to even out the sound, so what I mean by that is we start using compressors, EQs. Let's just bring a compressor just use an Ableton compressor against the kick. that's not too bad, okay? But if you want to even out the sound a bit, squash the sound a bit, then you can reduce this threshold, reduce the attack, increase the ratio. You can see there that GR signal means it's being squashed. So basically, you can increase the output. And what's happening here is we're going into the red. So you can see it here, you can see it here, and on the track itself, you can see it here. You can see that it's going into red. If it's going into red, or it's going into that sort of orangey red zone, you're peaking or clipping or getting close to clipping. Danger. In a lot of situations, it can ruin your recording. If you bring in another effect on top of that, so let's just bring in an EQ8. What can happen is even if your compressor, so now I've fixed the compressor's volume really, I've just reduced the output. That's now green, but you could get into a situation where the compressor's fine, but the okay, so the combination of the compressor and the EQ, I know that's an extreme example, will take us into the red zone up here. So the combination of different effects are just as important to look at as an effect alone. And the chain is really important as well, because even though the first element in the chain is green, the second could be red, or the first two could be green and the third could be red, etc. So you really need to check this little level here on all of the elements, and then just make sure you just don't go too high on your volume once you start doing the effects part of your mixing. Okay, so that's the second thing. So the first thing was check the sample. Second thing is check your effects. One thing that I think is a mistake, some people do this, but I think it's a mistake I should just show you, is you can put a limiter on the track. So even if we just increase this output, so you can see the actual effect itself has gone into the red clipping zone, and it's clipping. But the track is not clipping, okay? That's because the limiter is limiting the output gain to 0. So it means nothing exceeds 0. But have you got rid of your clipping by using a limiter? The answer is no, you haven't actually got rid of the clipping. The clipping is now inherent in the track. So the sound is within the track, but all the limiter is doing is stopping the signal going past 0. So I would be really wary of using actually compressors and limiters to reduce the clipping, because actually it's not really doing that, okay? Because if anything before it is clipping, it's probably clipping, okay? I wanted to answer this guy's question about muddy or boomy sounding kick. So just listen to the kick. That might be hurting your ears, sorry. So just by itself, the compressor's not clipping, okay? And then you can duplicate this by pressing Control D. It's not clipping. Right? So you can still not clip, but the more compression you put, let's just do another one, the worse the kick sounds. I know this sounds really obvious. If you put too much compression on a kick or a bass, it's just going to lose its dynamic quality. As I said, each track is not clipping. However, check out the master. Okay, so the master gets into the red zone a few times. And now this is where limiting is really important. Individually, your volume is fine, but when you add volume on top of volume on top of volume, you clip. You can see now that the level doesn't go above 0. in Ableton, the limiter defaults to a 0 on the gain. Okay, you could reduce it, increase it as you wish, but just the default is fine. Thank you very much. I'm hoping that answered your question. See you next time.